Gen Z doesn't want to work anymore, and I completely support them. Loyalty, dedication, and sacrifice are all noble traits we associate with work. This is why older generations took such pride in their careers and hardcore shame us when we say we don't want to work. But here's the thing. Nobody inherently actually wants to work. That is why you actually get paid to work. You are doing something that makes you miserable enough that you wouldn't do it for free. The mainstream media keeps on asking, why don't young people want to work anymore? But this is the wrong question to ask. Nobody ever wanted to work. It's not like this generation is unique or special in that regard. Do you think if you went back in time and asked a medieval peasant if he actually enjoys toiling in the hot sun for 12 hours a day, he would say yes? Of course not. People always worked because they needed the money. That's the simple truth. So then, the real question we should be asking is, why did anyone ever decide to work in the first place? And why are young people now deciding not to? We've already established that for the overwhelming majority of people, work is inherently a miserable, unpleasant task. This is why you wouldn't do it for free. So if that's the case, why anyone would want to work comes down to a simple equation. Is the ultimate benefit you get from your job worth the inherent misery that it inflicts on you? Back in the day, you could argue that it was. There were strong enough social and economic incentives that a lot of people decided that it was. Sure, you might have to spend 8 hours a day at a job you hated, but when you finished, you were rewarded with the ability to buy nice things. You could have a nice house to live in where you could support a family that loves and respects you. Fast forward to today, and these incentives just aren't there anymore. As this comment puts it perfectly, job pays $15 an hour, no health benefits, taxes take $6, your rent is $1,500 for a small bedroom with 5 roommates. Why bother? The greedy corporations and incompetent politicians have royally screwed up the economy and society to a level where the inherent misery has far exceeded the benefits that come from most jobs. Part 2. Reciprocity. I grew up a huge fan of the NBA in the early 2000s. I had a favorite player on the local team who I was a huge fan of. One fateful summer, that player left in free agency for a better opportunity elsewhere, and because I was too young to understand at the time, I felt incredibly sad and betrayed by this player. Then my stepfather would explain something to me that would forever change my outlook on the world.
Young philosophical gamer,
He said,
teams trade players all the time when they want a better situation. It's only fair that players have the same right.
though I was a very young child at the time, the concept instantly made sense to me. The concept of reciprocity. A lot of older generations think that Gen Z is entitled, but in my opinion, this is severely misguided. What is actually going on is that every other generation set such a horrible standard of sacrificing themselves for corporations that didn't care about them, that when Gen Z simply wants equal and fair treatment, it appears to be entitlement, relatively speaking. Going back to my earlier example about my favorite childhood NBA player here, companies want loyalty from you. They probe your resume non-stop and consider it a red flag if you've changed jobs a lot. They want to know every detail about why you quit your last job. They ask you questions throughout the interview, such as where do you see yourself in 5 years, to see if you plan to be loyal should they hire you. They want you to have the loyalty of a dog, all while they have the ability to fire and replace you anytime they want. And when it comes to the lack of reciprocity, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's time we call them out for their hypocrisy and hold them to the same standards they want to hold us to. If they call young people lazy for not wanting to work, let's call them lazy for not wanting to pay a decent wage. If they say young people are not entitled to higher wages, let's tell them they're not entitled to cheap youth labor in this era of record inflation. Fair is fair. Everything has to go both ways. Part 3. Workplace abuse. One thing I always found hilariously stupid about modern feminism is their obsession with taking down the patriarchy, while at the same time voraciously trying to push young women into the corporate world. It literally doesn't get more patriarchal, oppressive, and abusive than these ruthless, late-stage capitalist corporate overlords. I mean, I'm not the only one who sees the irony in all this, right? Anyways, this video isn't about feminism, so I digress. Just had to point that out real quick. The modern workplace is legit one of the most abusive, toxic, and inhumane environments there is. We've all seen and experienced bosses yelling at and chewing out employees for no reason. Young women being screamed at to the point of crying. Bosses intentionally disrespecting employees out of ego. The list goes on. It's actually hilarious that Gen Z is considered soft because they refuse to accept this. No, I'm not soft because I won't put up with disrespect and abuse. You're the one who's actually soft and has no self-respect if you're willing to tolerate this level of abuse and not do anything about it. The ironic thing is, people actually do understand. This is abusive and toxic when it comes to anything besides work. If you saw a husband treating his wife like this, a parent treating their child like this, even a friend treating a friend like this, you would instantly call out that toxic behavior and tell them to leave that person. But for some reason, as long as the person doing the abuse is wearing a nice suit and has the title of manager on his name tag, we're supposed to just eat it and keep working for him. Part 4. Society isn't worth working for anymore. I'm a millennial who was raised by boomer parents, and one thing we constantly heard from the boomer generation was, "We want you to become a productive member of society." Sounds reasonable enough, right? Well, in a good society, sure. But what happens when society turns on you, disrespects you, demonizes you, and stops caring about you? Do you still want to be a productive member for that society? One sentiment I'm seeing all over the internet, especially from young men, is that they're not concerned about society collapsing because they don't care if society collapses. I'm certainly not advocating for the collapse of society, but I definitely understand the sentiment. Listen, we're constantly force-fed free market principles and philosophies from the older generation. If we want to buy nice things, we have to work hard for it. If we want a better job, we have to get a better education for it. If we want people to like us, we have to be a friendly, respectful, and likable person to be around. So if we have to work for and earn what we want from society, why doesn't it apply the other way around? If society wants young people to work and contribute, it needs to fix the economy and give young people enough incentive to do so. It is not entitled to 65 years of labor from us. Throughout human history, societies have collapsed when they couldn't give their youth enough incentive to work and contribute. So I don't see why this modern society thinks it's entitled to be a special exception. Conclusion. There is a small potential silver lining to all of this. AI is promising to be a revolutionary technology that will change our lives. A lot of people are scared of it taking our jobs, but I view it a bit differently. Rather than taking our jobs, it might actually just free us from the shackles of being forced to work. Because of this, universal basic income ideas are rapidly gaining traction when this was unfathomable just a decade ago. While technology will progress fast enough to free us from the shackles of the labor market, the outdated and archaic mentalities around work could hinder our progress towards a world where one day we ultimately won't have to work. When we look at the horrors of the past, slavery, witchcraft, horrible wars, and dictators, it's easy for us in hindsight to think that people back then had such primitive mindsets that they allowed such horrors to occur. But it would be very arrogant to assume that we won't be judged the same way by future generations, decades and centuries from now. It's very possible that in the year 2100, people will think it's absolutely horrible that we were forced to give 65 years of labor to a society that didn't care about us, that people worked themselves into the ground for a corporation that didn't care about them. But to get from here to there, the shift in mentality, the awakening has to start from somewhere. And I think I'm starting to see the beginnings of that in a younger generation that doesn't want to work in 2024. Thanks for watching this video. It took quite a lot of time and effort to make it. So if you enjoyed it, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated.